Welcome back to another episode of Rock Boys Football. The whole college football world talking about the transfer portal. We got some big time spring games coming up this Saturday. And Dill, one of my favorite spring games every single year, the Oklahoma Sooners. You want to just know how elite this fan base is. You just turn on the spring game, elite turnout every single year. I'm fired up for this one. Want to talk about some breakout players, some storylines that we're keeping an eye on for this Oklahoma program heading into 2024. Before we get into it, and as always, just want to say thank you to you guys. Massive shout out, as always, to the Oklahoma fans. Y'all continue to show a ton of love, a ton of support to the fellas. If y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. Much more importantly, we're going to give you some of our breakout players. Would love to hear some of your breakout players in the comment section. And Dill, I'm going to put you right on the spot, really right off the bat here. Looking at this offense, who you got as your breakout player for this Saturday?
I want to see Jaquez Petaway have a game, and I think he'll get a shot. Again, the weather maybe won't be the greatest, but you got a couple of injuries, some guys who, again, are going to be back for the season but aren't going to be playing in the spring game. And frankly, I think you want to see this Oklahoma offense get a little bit more explosive, getting the ball down the field. And we've talked about it. I mean, with Dylan Gabriel, they had an inherent cap on what they could do, what parts of the field they could target. And I think if they can get Jaquez Petaway going or Brennan Thompson going or one of these younger, more explosive wideouts who can really get down the field, I think that does a lot to open the field up for guys like Jaleel Farouk, who, again, you're looking at him. He needs to have a big breakout season. I think he had to step back as a junior. You want to see him have a big senior year. And you can say the same about Angelo Anthony, who, again, was playing really well before he got hurt. But as a guy, when he's got space underneath to work and run his routes and do his thing, can be really effective. So I think if they can get Jaquez Petaway or Brennan Thompson going, I think that opens up a lot.
Yeah, we've talked about this. We've hammered this conversation throughout spring practice, and that is Jackson Arnold completely elevates this Oklahoma offense from an arm talent standpoint. Like, there were throws that you just couldn't ask Dylan Gabriel to make on a consistent basis that Jackson Arnold certainly can make those. And so you look at attacking the deeper third, something you couldn't really do as much with Dylan Gabriel, Jaquez Petaway, Brennan Thompson, guys that can work downfield. I know Nick Anderson's not going to be healthy, but he's another guy that can win vertically. That's one of the biggest storylines for this Oklahoma offense. Now, my breakout player, I'm going to go to a position that I think was just really underwhelming for Oklahoma because I don't think they had a difference maker there at that tight end spot. Bauer Sharp, coming from the FCS, when you read the spring practice notes, we knew this kid was an elite athlete that played a little quarterback, found his role at tight end. Dill, this is a guy that gives you a ton of juice at that tight end position, work in the middle of the field. And on top of that, you talk about a young quarterback going into the SEC. You want to give him a good tight end that works the middle of the field, kind of that safety blanket kind of guy. You look at this roster and say, who's going to be the difference maker at tight end? Yeah, Jake Roberts is solid coming from Baylor. Bauer Sharp's the guy that has the upside. Oklahoma didn't have a tight end like this last year, so Bauer Sharp going to be my guy for this Oklahoma breakout performer on Saturday afternoon.
And again, it furthers that kind of idea of using a bit more of the field, being able to attack the middle, up the seams, and put some more pressure on linebackers too. Again, I think with all of that, with the idea of getting your playmakers a little bit more space, you throw in Deion Burks, a guy who you talk about run after the catch and making those plays underneath, a guy who can really do it. So you have too much of that talent. Again, I think what you want to see is them unlock, just take advantage of more of the field when you have the arm talent.
So I totally agree with that. Now, getting into Jackson Arnold, like, what are you looking for from Jackson Arnold during this spring game? I kind of have mine, and that is, Jackson Arnold, I watched your high school film. I saw you during the Arizona game. We know what you can do in terms of the flash plays, those draw-dropping throws. What I want to see from Jackson Arnold on Saturday afternoon is just command of the offense, right? The ball coming out on time accurately, not putting the ball in harm's way, not doing too much, right? I thought at times during that Arizona game, you saw him make some incredible throws, right? Hitting Brennan Thompson in stride for 70 yards, but you also saw him try to do too much at times. Jackson Arnold, play within yourself, use your weapons. That's what I'm looking for. And if you give us some splash plays to get pumped about, I'm all for that. But I want to see Jackson Arnold in command of this offense and playing within this offense during Saturday.
Well, and especially kind of building off that Arizona game where there were too many moments and maybe even stretches where you could say it
Yeah.
didn't always feel like there was command. And again, he hit those big plays. We all know he can hit the big plays, but you want to see the really good decisions. And I'm not saying you can necessarily like use the spring game as the end all be all for quarterback play, but I think you can get a better sense of how comfortable quarterbacks are. And you even look at like the Clemson spring game, if you like, Cade Klubnik didn't necessarily seem to make some of those strides, some of those decision making, like throwing the ball in harm's way. And yeah, I don't know if Oklahoma.
Everybody says that you can't get a feel for offenses during spring games. That's a lie. Like, again, I'm not going to read completely into spring games until we saw Clemson back-to-back years have brutal performances during the spring game where you're just saying, hey, that offense has a lot of question marks. Well, guess what? The offense stunk during the fall as well. You can get a feel for where this offense is at. And I'm not saying if this Oklahoma offense struggles on Saturday, it's a done deal, but you probably get a feel for what this Oklahoma offense is going to be in 2024. The running back spot, zero question marks about it. A healthy Gavin Sawchuk, one of the top running backs in the country. Let's get to kind of the big storyline, at least for me in this Oklahoma offense, is the offensive line. The Sooner fans know that. Y'all know I rock with the Sooners. I am afraid, or hesitant, I should say, to really hitch my wagon to this Oklahoma team heading into 2024 until I know that offensive line can be good in the SEC. If you can block this Oklahoma defensive line, move guys off the line of scrimmage, hold up in pass protection, if I see that on Saturday, you could probably sign me up for getting on the Oklahoma train heading into 2024 here.
And frankly, to me, I think you're fairly comfortable with what they have on the inside, bringing in a fair amount of experience, have some good young players. Troy Everett probably is going to be back for the fall, and he's a guy who I think you're very comfortable with.
Nails.
At center. So to me, it's going to be 100% about the tackles, and Jacob Sexton needs to, like, in my opinion, just step up, take control of that room, and be a stalwart at that left tackle spot. Because you look at the right side, I don't necessarily think they have a star on this team on the right side, but they have three guys. And I think, frankly, hopefully Jake Taylor's the one who emerges because he probably does have some upside. You know what Michael Tarquin and Spencer Brown are. Decent college for decent Division I offensive linemen.
Yeah, you brought those tackles in to raise the floor of this tackle room. Hey, we've seen Spencer Brown play solid football at the Power 5 level. We've seen Michael Tarquin back at Florida actually played some damn good football. I don't know what happened at USC. I'm going to chalk that up to whatever was wrong with that USC program. I'm going to blame that. Michael Tarquin, he can get it going if we kind of see that Florida version of him once again. The offensive line, big-time storyline for me now. You go over to the defensive side of the football, Dill. We normally, or at least I personally, like to start talking about the front seven first. That's really where I want to see teams be dominant if I'm evaluating a defense. For this episode, I want to start with the back end, Dill. We talked about Zach Alley coming to this Oklahoma offense, how creative that he gets with the back end defenders. I couldn't think of a better personnel room for Zach Alley to walk into in terms of how he wants to use these safeties than what you got for the Sooners. What my eyes are going to be on is, hey, we got Billy Bowman Jr., Peyton Bowen, guys like Spears Jennings, loaded safeties that can do so many different things. Hey, Zach Alley, how are you going to use these cats heading into 2024?
I mean, that will be the interesting thing because you're kind of right. I think you got four guys with Dolby, Bowen, Spears Jennings, and Bowman. You have four guys who can play. And again, you have that cheetah role, so you can probably have three safeties for the most part on the field at once. But again, we kind of talked about Oklahoma's real problem last year is not being able to control the middle of the field at all. I think it was very painfully obvious in that Arizona game where they just could not defend that portion of the field. In that, to me, I think you kind of see how Zach Alley used a fair amount of safety personnel in that middle of the field, used them to control that area. I'm kind of interested to see if they do a little bit more of that instead of putting so much pressure on those linebackers, because I did think that was – it just didn't feel like it was working last year for Oklahoma to have their linebackers be solely responsible.
And you go back to the Jacksonville State games, and like these safeties are coming in the middle of the field. They're playing that robber role, and I love it too. Like you saw it in that Arizona game, them just get picked apart. It's a tough ask for linebackers to deal in zone coverage with some of these slot wide receivers. We're going to see a lot more safeties take on that responsibility, potentially freeing up these linebackers to do a little bit more damage as front seven members, as less a little bit more in coverage. So I'm excited about that. The linebacker unit.
I'm also interested to see what they do at the cornerback spot, because you talk about a room that I think is hyper competitive right now, especially adding in Des Malone. I mean, I think Connie Walker's a good player. You got some interesting young guys like Jacoby Johnson. I'm kind of interested to see how they use that room because I think the position was good. I think, again, I expect Woody Washington and Gentry Williams to be the guys, but it wouldn't surprise me if you saw some of those other guys mix in because, again, it's not like that room was nails last year. I expect those two to take a step, especially Gentry Williams only being a sophomore last year, coming into his junior year. But I think that's a really competitive room, and I don't necessarily think those jobs are completely locked up.
You just highlighted the reason why I'm so excited about this Oklahoma program over the next couple of years. That's the competitive depth. Like, you can tell Brent Venables has really dug his teeth into this roster, and you look top to bottom. Like, if you want to start for this Oklahoma team, you have to be great. There is a lot of really good guys that will not be starters for Oklahoma come the fall. That competitive depth is going to be huge. Going to the defensive line, Dale, this is where I'm going to ask you for your breakout player. A lot of guys, I'll go first, and I'm just going to go PJ. You guys know that's been my guy for the last 2 years at this point. Super excited for him coming out of high school. We knew that there'd probably be a year of development. Dale, this is the year that we kind of had marked for PJ and his development. I want to see him kind of show it for 2024 on Saturday afternoon.
And I agree with you. I mean, you look at Caden Woolard, you look at our Mason Thomas, PJ, you need one of those guys, I think, to kind of grab the bull by the horns and be a bit more productive. Because you look at the sack numbers, they were okay, but nobody was putting up those big, 8+ sacks on the year. I think, again, you need elite edge rushers to do that. It's really hard to gather that many. Playing the way Ethan Downs plays, for example, where he is extremely disruptive, extremely productive in the run game, but doesn't necessarily have that freakish, twitchy athletic ability that PJ has or our Mason Thomas has or even Caden Willard coming in. Those guys have it. And again, I think you want those numbers to be up a little bit. I think you want one or two guys to be in that 8+ range in sacks on the year. And I think it's got to be one of those three because, again, last year I think it was too reliant on just big, heavy, physical defensive linemen who, again, they put a lot of pressure on teams. They were very disruptive. But sacks are huge in college football. They kill drives. I think you want those numbers up a little bit.
You go back to Oklahoma when they were playing their best defense through the first 5 weeks of the season. Though they led the team in tackles for loss, negative plays created, I should say. Right? This Oklahoma defense goes with the disruption and the negative plays created from that front seven. And so you want to see that in that year 3 Brent Venables defense really kind of maintain that kind of production because when that production came off from the negative plays, that's when this Oklahoma defense kind of struggled. A couple of the names that I feel like we just have to throw out or else the Oklahoma fans are going to light us up in the comment section. David Stone, Jaden Jackson. My big question is, can you be reliant on these guys to give you good reps? I'm not saying David Stone, Jaden Jackson are going to be starters for this team, but we talk about elite defensive lines, not only having good starters, you got to have good depth, especially in the SEC. Oklahoma's going for some big fish in the portal. They're going to be on campus for the spring game. What did Jaden Jackson and David Stone look like? Are they going to be guys that can contribute for Oklahoma come the fall? That's what I'll have my eyes on as well. Though that'll do it. We'll hop on.
One more thing. What do you think about that second linebacker spot besides Danny Stutzman? Because that's another one I think is very much up in the air. And frankly, I think 3 guys are, even Lewis Carter might be in there too. So I think that's a very up for grabs position. I think you want to see. To me, I think it's Kip Lewis or Jaron Kanek, probably the clubhouse leaders, just in my mind. But I think that position's kind of up for grabs. I'm kind of interested to see what they do there.
100%. So much competition on this field, and that's what makes this spring game so exciting for me. We'll be back on, though, immediately after this Oklahoma spring game, recapping what we saw. Oklahoma fans, appreciate you guys rocking with the fellas. Would love to hear from y'all in the comment section. Breakout players that we might be sleeping on, and we'll talk to y'all later.